That day was a perfect cloudless day, an ideal day for anyone to celebrate a milestone. Ironically, it was also the day my heart began to rot from the inside out. A 20th wedding anniversary, a milestone that any couple would celebrate. And I, Russell, a man who had been with Marrera for 2 decades, had prepared for this day as if it were the opening chapter for the next 20 years. Little did I know, it would turn out to be the final chapter. That morning, Mara brought me coffee in bed, sweet, gentle, as if she were trying to erase the months of tension after my mother's passing. She wasn't someone who often did things like that, so I found it unusual. But I pushed it aside. I wanted to believe it was a sign of a fresh start. I was so naive. We renewed our vows in her parents' backyard. A small ceremony, just family and a few close friends. Mara wore a simple white dress, not the wedding dress from before, because she told me it didn't fit anymore. But I didn't mind that. I just thought she looked beautiful, radiant in the way I had fallen in love with her from the first glance. Our 2 children, Eric, 16, and Serenity, 13, stood there, looking as if they were forced to participate. But at least they were there. I got emotional as I repeated my vows. I spoke about the years we had been through together, how we had grown, built a family, and overcame losses, especially the death of my mother 3 months ago. What I didn't realize was that this was the last moment I'd ever truly trust in our marriage. Dinner at Carmelo's, a fancy Italian restaurant that Mara had always wanted to try, was supposed to be the perfect ending to what seemed like the perfect day. But that perfection shattered over something as simple as a trip to the restroom. I stood up in the middle of dinner, excusing myself to use the bathroom. The men's room was at the end of the hall, past the kitchen. As I was walking back, I saw Mara, her phone pressed to her ear, standing quietly in a corner where no one could see. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but when you hear your name, instinctively, you stop. Russell doesn't know anything. I've transferred most of the inheritance into accounts he can't access. After we sell the house next month, I'll file for divorce and take the kids to California. I thought my heart stopped, not in anger but in disbelief, like I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She continued, her voice still low but firm. He's too caught up in his grief over his mom to notice anything. The realtor says there will be more offers next week. We'll be out of here soon. What? What realtor? The house isn't even listed yet. I felt dizzy, my vision blurring like I was seasick in a room spinning around me. She was talking about the kids, how Eric would be difficult at first, but he'd adjust, how Serenity was closer to her, how us renewing our vows this morning would only make me look more of a fool when everything came out. I stood there, hidden behind the screen, my fists clenched, heart pounding in my chest. She turned around, and I pressed myself back, like a thief caught in the middle of my own story. 2 minutes later, I returned to the table. I smiled at her. I ordered the most expensive bottle of champagne on the menu, my hand still trembling. I toasted with the woman who had just schemed to steal everything I had. She smiled back, beaming as if nothing had changed. She smiled right after whispering to her brother that I was about to be abandoned like a fool. When we got home, she made the first move, trying to get close. I pretended to have a headache. She pouted and headed to the bathroom. That's when I rushed downstairs, opened the safe. My mother's jewelry was gone. The watch my father had given me to pass down to Eric vanished without a trace. I checked the joint account. There was barely enough left to cover the utility bills. Everything had been cleaned out. I didn't sleep that night. I sat next to the woman I had sworn to love forever, watching her sleep. And I swore to myself, if she wanted to play this game, I would be the one to end it. I returned to the table with a forced smile and a dazed look in my eyes. Mara was smiling, holding up her champagne glass to mine, as if nothing had happened. "Here's to 20 years of love," she said, her voice sweet as honey, as if she hadn't just whispered words of betrayal only minutes ago. I clinked my glass against hers, trying to steady my shaking hand, keeping my anger in check. I don't remember exactly what I ate. All I remember is her talking nonstop, about the food, the well wishes from friends, and how happy she was. In my mind, I was calculating numbers, the amounts of money from the inheritance of our parents, every penny I had carefully saved. I remember trusting her enough to let her manage some of our joint accounts. I remember laughing when she said, "Let me handle it," and now I know what handling it really meant. That night when we got home, She was more affectionate than usual. "It's a celebration," she said, her arms draping over my neck. I felt like I was being constricted by a snake, not embraced by the wife of 20 years. I faked a headache. For the first time, I said no. For the first time, I was afraid of my own body, terrified to continue pretending. When she fell asleep, I went downstairs. The kitchen light cast a dim glow, just enough for me to avoid turning on the overheads. I opened my laptop, my hands trembling as I entered the password to our shared email account. I never expected to find so much. A list of contacts with the real estate agent, emails about the home appraisal, which she called refinancing, a string of messages with her brother, the one I had always suspected, but never had concrete proof. And then there was Marcus, a name that hit me like a punch to the heart. Not Cannon, her brother, but another man. New plan, fresh start, house in San Diego. The kids won't be hurt for long. I vomited in the sink. Around 2 a.m., I called Stephen, my best friend, the one I knew would never ask unnecessary questions. "I need a place to crash for a few hours," I said. He didn't ask anything further, just, "Did you bring the paperwork?" That question said it all. I gathered the important documents, the children's birth certificates, the inheritance papers, the copies of my parents' savings bonds, everything I knew that if lost, I wouldn't be able to prove the truth. I checked the safe. My father's antique watch was gone. The necklace my mother had left for Serenity was also missing. The next morning, I sat in the car in front of Joan's office as the bank opened. She was someone my sister, Anna, had mentioned before. "Need a good lawyer to get out of a family mess? Call Joan." I never thought I'd need that advice, but today I needed it like I needed air to breathe. Joan sat across from me, her sharp eyes fixed on me as her fingers clicked on the keyboard, like she was writing a sentence for my wife. When I mentioned the emails, the bank accounts, the shady transfers, and the saved conversations, her eyes gleamed like someone who had just spotted a sharp blade in a legal battle. "We need to act fast before she can transfer the money overseas or disappear from the state," she said. I returned home before Marrera came back from her yoga class. The locksmith had changed all the locks in the house. I packed the essentials and placed a note on the vanity mirror. I heard everything. The lawyer, the bank, and the restaurant all know. Don't come back without your lawyer. When she found out, the screaming echoed through the neighborhood. The neighbors peered out from behind curtains, while my wife, in her tight yoga gear, stood outside yelling and banging on the door like a hurricane. I didn't open it. I was on the phone arranging to freeze the accounts. The police arrived when Cannon showed up, trying to mediate for the family. I presented the documents, the evidence of illegal asset transfers, and an inventory of inheritance property that wasn't part of the marital assets. The police glanced over the papers, nodded, and told Cannon, "You should step back. This is a civil matter." That single line was worth more than 1,000 words. I texted Eric and Serenity to pick them up after school. I didn't know how I would explain it, but I knew one thing. I wouldn't let her speak first. Not ever again. I sat in the car staring at the front door of the house where my wife, the one who had just tried to betray me after 20 years of marriage, was screaming and falling apart as if she was the victim. I didn't go inside right away, not because I was scared, but because I knew that if I walked in now, I would carry the anger in every step I took, every word I said, and I wasn't sure I could control it. I didn't want the kids to see me like this. An hour later, after Marrera finally left the porch, dragging her suitcase and her shredded shame, I dared to step inside. The house, the home that had once been the center of so many Christmases, birthday parties, sleepless nights together, now felt suffocatingly empty. Every corner of the walls brought back beautiful memories, tainted by lies. I went into the bedroom, opened the safe to check once again. My father's vinyl collection, my mother's ruby necklace, all gone. She had taken everything of value I had once cherished like treasure. I collapsed onto the cold tile floor, my heart breaking again, not because of the loss of things, but because of the loss of trust. I knew I couldn't continue wallowing in pain like a victim. I had to act. If she had plans to betray me behind my back, then now I would have a plan to turn that betrayal into her downfall. I called Joan, my lawyer, and scheduled a meeting for the next morning. Then I sent a message to Anna, my sister. and Stephen, my best friend from college. They were the only two people I knew would stand by me, not out of loyalty, but because of the truth. Joan listened without interrupting, then placed her hand on my shoulder. Russell, I've seen a lot of dirty divorces, but none with an adversary as cunning as this. But if she has her tricks, we'll have our moves. She helped me strategize, freezing all of our accounts. Fortunately, we hadn't completed the sale of the house, and with the evidence from the emails, messages, and photos I had extracted from Mara's laptop before she left, Joan immediately filed for an emergency order with the court. Next came the personal media campaign. I began quietly reaching out to close friends, colleagues, and even those who had been present at the vow renewal ceremony. Just 3 days ago, I sent them a few photos, some snippets from her emails with Marcus about her plan to move to California with the stolen inheritance. I didn't say much, just left one line. Do you really know her? The reactions came faster than I expected. Some people replied with shock. A few admitted they had noticed Morera's strange behavior at my mother's funeral, but didn't ask any questions. And then there were those who sent me a message Mara had sent them just days earlier, claiming I was mentally unstable and that she was trying to protect the family. By nightfall, I found myself sitting in the living room, holding a cup of cold tea with Serenity's forgotten iPad in front of me. I powered it on, and as if fate had a hand in it, Morera's Gmail was still logged in. In the inbox was an unsent draft email. The subject line, urgent complaint, protecting assets and custody rights. I froze. She wasn't just planning to leave me. She was planning to erase me from the lives of my children. At that moment, something inside me clicked. No longer was it pain, but a will to survive. I stood up, grabbed my father's old journal, the one he left with a few lines that said, "When you're backed into a corner, remember you don't have to win. You just have to make sure you don't lose." I wasn't going to lose. Not this time. The next morning, I drove Eric and Serenity to school. No music, no conversation. The heavy silence in the car made everything feel suffocating, like a pressure cooker about to explode. I told them I'd update them later with a message during the day. They both nodded without saying a word. As soon as they got out of the car, I drove straight to the bank with the paperwork Joan's lawyer had prepared. My name was still the sole name on the deed of the house I inherited from my parents, and in the prenuptial asset declaration, all inheritance was clearly classified as personal property not subject to division in the event of divorce. But the issue didn't stop with the house. I presented the bank manager with evidence that Mara had secretly transferred $320,000 from our joint account into 3 newly opened personal accounts. As expected, the manager, a middle-aged woman with a razor-sharp gaze, immediately took action. All 3 accounts were temporarily frozen on the spot under an urgent legal request. Leaving the bank, I headed to Joan's office. She was waiting for me with 3 thick files, so heavy they could double as pillows. "Today we clean up the chessboard, Russell," she said, her eyes bright with anticipation, as though she was preparing for a battle she'd been waiting for a long time. "And she won't have time to react." I went home to prepare myself for the hearing the next morning. But as soon as I stepped inside, I saw a threatening letter shoved under the door. No envelope. The handwriting was crooked, but I immediately recognized it. It was Cannon's. "You think you've won? You have no idea who you're dealing with." I didn't bother reacting. I just took a picture of it, sent it to Joan, and tore the paper up, tossing it into the fireplace. That evening, I sat down with Eric and Serenity. I knew I couldn't keep hiding the truth any longer. After a silent dinner, I called them to the living room. "There are some things I need to make clear, and I promise, everything I'm about to say is the truth." Eric crossed his arms, his eyes full of doubt. Serenity was hugging a pillow, her eyes red from crying, though I hadn't noticed when it started. I told them, not everything, but enough for them to understand what their mother had done. I showed Eric the screenshots of the bank transaction emails, the house sale agreement Mara signed without discussing it, the conversation with Marcus, and a few questionable messages with Lauren. Serenity broke down in tears. Eric stayed silent for a long time before asking, "Does Mom still love us?" The question choked me up. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I looked my son in the eyes and said, "I don't know, but I know I will never use or hurt you guys. Eric nodded slowly. Serenity leaned into her brother's shoulder, her face full of pain. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in my office reading and rereading the notes Joan had prepared. I knew tomorrow's hearing would be a turning point. Mira thought she could fool this entire family with a few clever lies. But tomorrow everything would change. By dawn, my phone buzzed with a message from an unfamiliar number. Marcus, I've read the file you sent. I'll be in court. I'm tired of being used by her, and I think my daughter needs to know that her father isn't a fool. I simply replied, thank you, truly. The next morning I got dressed, prepared the files, and packed my suitcase full of evidence before dropping the kids off at Anna's. My sister would watch over them while I went to court. Before I left, Serenity grabbed my hand. Dad, don't let Mom take everything. I knelt down, looked my daughter in the eyes, and said, I won't let anyone take what belongs to our family. Not ever. The courthouse wasn't as grand as you see in the movies. There were no towering arches or marble hallways echoing with the sound of high heels. It was just a square, quiet building, dull and colorless, much like the divorces that took place inside it, full of hurt and exhaustion. I arrived almost an hour early. Joan, my lawyer, was already sitting at a nearby cafe, holding an Americano, her face devoid of any nervousness. She was the type of person who walked into battle as if she were strolling through a park. Beside her was a suitcase filled with heavy documents, evidence, bank statements, property sale papers, exchange emails, Marcus's audio recording, and even printed screenshots of Mira's TikTok videos. Are you mentally prepared? She asked, not looking up from her phone. I nodded. There was no turning back now. When we walked into the courtroom, I immediately spotted Mira, standing next to Cannon, with a face full of annoyance as though she were forced to attend a PTA meeting at dawn. Mira wore a modest navy blue dress, her hair tied neatly, and black-rimmed glasses, perfectly crafted to look like a devoted mother, a suffering victim. I almost laughed. If it weren't for what she had done to me, to my children, I might have felt pity for her. Her lawyer, a slick man with gelled hair, a pinstripe suit and shiny cufflinks, looked a bit flustered, and I knew exactly why. He didn't know that Marcus was on our side. Joan quickly presented the urgent documents we had filed, evidence that Mira had secretly transferred money, papers about the house being sold without my consent, exchange emails with the realtor, and, the most important piece, an audio recording of Marcus, where he admitted to sending $50,000 to Mira so she could escape an abusive marriage and protect the assets. It was all a lie. Mira sat across from me, gripping the chair, her lips pressed tightly together. Cannon kept glancing at me, his eyes a mix of panic and resentment. Then it was Joan's turn to play her trump card. She opened her laptop and played a series of TikTok videos, the very clips my sister Anna had secretly found. The courtroom fell silent as Mira's voice came through the Bluetooth speaker. While he thought we were preparing for our 20th anniversary, I was preparing for a new beginning. The footage showed Mira packing a suitcase, close-ups of books about co-parenting after divorce, and scrolling through listings for apartments in San Diego. The timestamps on each video were from 2 to 3 months before my mother passed, proving that none of this had anything to do with her being abandoned while I took care of my mom. The judge, a middle-aged woman with a gaze as sharp as a knife, said nothing during the presentation. She simply made notes in silence. But when Mira stood up, seemingly ready to explain, the judge's voice cut through the air. Sit down, Ms. Peterson. I did not ask for your statement. Once all the evidence had been presented, Marcus was called to testify. He walked into the courtroom with a steely gaze, showing no sign of playing a part. He recounted the entire process of being deceived by Mira, from the first message, to the bank transfers, to the promises of a future together. She told me her husband was an abuser, controlling, even gambling away the inheritance money. I believed her. I sent the money. I was deceived, Marcus said, his voice hoarse. Mira's lawyer attempted to counter, claiming that Mira's relationship with Marcus was nothing more than a temporary friendship, and that she never intended to leave her family. Joan immediately presented the evidence. Photos from Mira's email to Marcus, along with a deposit contract for an apartment in California. The address was in the school district where Mira had previously contacted to enroll Serenity. When confronted, Mira lowered her head, but then broke into tears, attempting to play the victim. I just, I felt abandoned. I was lonely. I didn't know what I was doing. I never meant to hurt anyone. Joan didn't let up. You didn't know what you were doing, but you knew exactly when the real estate market was rising, how to transfer money into private accounts, how to set up secret emails, how to create TikTok videos to build an image. The tension in the room was palpable. I didn't take my eyes off Mira. The woman I had once loved, trusted with everything, was now nothing more than a calculating liar, full of deceit. The judge struck the gavel after more than 3 hours of arguments and presentations. She delivered her verdict. Temporary primary custody of the children was awarded to me with supervised visitation from Mira. The illegally transferred inheritance money was ordered to be returned to the original account. The house was ruled to be my personal property, not subject to division. The court also recommended forwarding the case to the district attorney for consideration of financial fraud charges. When she finished, I didn't feel victorious. I just felt exhausted. But at least I knew I had protected what remained, my children, my honor, and the truth. Mira began crying, not the kind of crying that comes from regret, but the kind of crying when a perfect plan has just been destroyed. Cannon punched the wall as he walked out into the hallway. "You'll regret this, Russell," he yelled. I just stared him down. "No, you'll regret trusting the wrong person." I'm not sure what a sense of emptiness actually looks like, but I was certain I was carrying it inside my chest the morning after the trial. Not because I regretted anything. Far from it. The judge's decision was a win, legally, financially, and in terms of the truth. But that victory, in some strange way, also sealed the end of an era in my life. 20 years of marriage. 20 years that I thought were filled with love, but turned out to be nothing more than an elaborate performance. The kids, Eric and Serenity, seemed to sense that rupture too. The atmosphere in the house that morning felt dense. No music, no laughter, just the sound of spoons lightly tapping against cereal bowls and the squeak of wooden chairs shifting as the kids got up from the table. Serenity avoided my gaze. She sat in the corner of the couch, hugging a pillow, staring blankly out the window as if waiting for an answer from the world outside. Eric was quiet, but not angry. He was thinking. I knew because I had been that teenage boy myself, carrying unanswered questions and a simmering anger, suppressed to the point of exhaustion. "You can still call your mom," I said as I cleared the dishes. "I won't stop you. No matter what she does, she's still your mother." Eric didn't respond. Serenity pursed her lips, nodded slightly, and pulled her phone out of her hoodie pocket. I left them alone, heading upstairs and closing the door behind me with all the patience I had left. The following weeks passed in a whirlwind. Meetings with Joan, filling out school forms, answering emails from the opposing lawyer, and dealing with the list of missing assets. Some things would never be recovered. The watch from my dad, my mom's wedding ring, a few pieces of jewelry I clearly remembered being kept in the safe. Mira said she sold them. No remorse, no explanation. I wasn't shocked anymore. Just disappointed. Fortunately, Joan worked like a machine. She helped me recover the full amount of money from the accounts that had been transferred, nearly $320,000, a portion of which was used to pay legal fees and cover the small expenses from the initial chaotic phase. Mira started visiting the kids at Anna's place, a ground-floor apartment filled with plants and light. Anna didn't mind the awkwardness. My sister was cold but fair. Every time Mira came, she made a full record, like a silent witness. The first time, Mira brought Serenity an expensive Japanese imported doll that the girl had once been obsessed with. Eric got a new tech book, still wrapped in its paper. I heard that the boy handed it back right away. "Mom doesn't need to bribe me." Serenity kept the doll, but when we got home, she just placed it on the shelf and never touched it again. I also started to get my work life back in order. My boss, a bald man with a tired smile, was genuinely surprised when he found out. It turns out his ex-wife did something similar, though on a smaller scale. He understood, and he agreed to let me work more flexibly, a blessing that can't be measured in money. The kids need me. I need them. We started to set up a new routine, having dinner together 3 nights a week, sharing dishwashing duties, and dedicating at least one evening to no phones. I taught Eric how to use a drill, while Serenity learned how to bake chocolate chip cookies. These weren't perfect moments. They were just real. And I realized the truth, no matter how painful, is always gentler than lies wrapped in beautiful ribbons. As for Mira, she's still living in the city. I know because a friend of mine happened to see her working at a fashion store in the mall. There are rumors that Marcus cut ties with her after the trial. I guess that makes sense. The man lost $50,000 in his trust. But Mira didn't disappear. She started posting videos on TikTok, this time about her healing journey after a collapsed marriage. I accidentally came across one of her clips on the suggested feed, probably because Serenity's name was mentioned in the caption. I just smiled and scrolled past. Some people never stop rewriting history. I, on the other hand, am just trying to write a new chapter for the rest of my life. One evening in early fall, Serenity brought me a cup. Written on it in messy handwriting was, "Dad, at least. You're not Mom." That's a good thing, right? I smiled, lifted the cup, and tapped it gently to her forehead. Yeah, that's definitely a good thing. Fall slowly gave way to the gray, cold days of winter. On the roof, the last leaves fell, scattered like the final notes of a song, unfinished. My divorce from Mira was officially finalized in early November, after nearly 6 months of struggle, pain, but also clarity and resolve. The final ruling from the court didn't just grant me full custody of the kids, the family house, and the majority of the inheritance that had been restored, but it also gave me something more important than anything else: the spiritual sovereignty of my own life. Mara kept a few personal belongings, the car she used to drive, and she has weekend visitation rights with the kids on alternate weekends. She no longer stays with Lauren but has moved into a small apartment near downtown, reportedly thanks to a friend's sponsorship. Honestly, I didn't care much. Occasionally, I still see Mira's new TikTok videos. She's changed her style, from independent, seductive woman to a mother healing from a divorce with an emotional abuser. She tells her story in a trembling voice, with tears welling up in her eyes, receiving thousands of likes and words of support from strangers who have no idea what really happened. I thought about responding, telling the truth, posting the evidence. But then I realized when you've walked out of a storm, there's no need to go back into the rain just to prove you were once soaked. For me, things gradually settled down. No fairy tale ending, but there's a path, and I'm walking it. Eric has returned to his usual self at school. He joined the soccer team and recently started talking to a girl named Kayla. I see his eyes light up when he talks about her, and it makes my heart feel lighter. Serenity is different. She still gets sad sometimes, especially on weekends when her mom doesn't come to pick her up. But she started keeping a journal, drawing, and even joined the school book club for the first time. I don't ask too many questions. I simply sit next to her, read together, and listen when she's ready to talk. We've had those normal, precious evenings: frozen pizza and cartoons, toast and guessing Dad's old song titles. No one mentions the 20th anniversary celebration anymore, but I know that all three of us remember, in our own different ways. One day I caught Serenity sitting on the windowsill, holding the cup she gave me, the one that says, "Dad, at least you're not Mom." She turned to look at me, her expression more serious than usual. "Do you hate Mom?" she asked. I sat down beside her, silent for a long time. "Yes, I used to, but not anymore. I don't feel the need to be angry anymore." Do you still love Mom?" The question choked me up. It wasn't a question about current feelings, but about everything that had once existed. "I think I love the person I believed your mom was, but that person never really existed." She nodded slightly, then resting her head on my shoulder. "I've also started writing again. Not project plans or work reports, but thoughts, stories, journal entries like this, almost as if piecing myself back together. Whenever I feel lost, I read through them and remind myself just how far I've come. I'm not sure what the future holds. I'm not dreaming of a new woman or a new chapter of love, not because I don't believe anymore, but because I'm busy relearning how to love myself first." Outside, the rain has started to fall. Eric runs in from the garage holding a handmade wooden box. The secret box, he calls it. Serenity is baking cookies in the kitchen, and this house, though not perfect, for the first time in many years, feels like it truly belongs to me. I don't know how many people are reading this, or if anyone has ever had to hear the person they loved lie behind their back, especially on an anniversary that was supposed to be a milestone of happiness. But if anyone out there is going through this, I want to say one thing. You don't need to win right away. Just survive today. Then one day you'll wake up in a small house with warm yellow lights and realize you haven't just survived. You've been reborn. Thank you for walking with me through this story. If it touched you, please leave a comment, share the story with others, and don't forget to support the channel so I can keep bringing you more stories ahead. We all have our wounds, but just like cracks that let the light in, sometimes it's from those cracks that we truly see our hearts. I'll see you again in the next story.